Hello, beautiful friends. I am Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes. And you can learn more about my offerings at my website, illuminatingsouls.com. I also have a fairly active Facebook page of the same name, and I have a daily inspiration email blast where I send out an inspiring email message every weekday. So lots of ways that we can connect outside of the podcast, but for now, the angels and I are here to co-create a sweet, cozy, beautiful space where you can drift off and rest. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I use sleep podcasts myself, and I have been using them nightly for several years now. For a lot of my adult life, I used the television to help me go to sleep. But I don't know quite what changed. And several years ago, I found my way to sleep podcasts, and I love the ritual of crawling into bed at the end of a day and putting in my earbuds and selecting an episode and then drifting off. It is a delicious experience. And I also sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, at 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. Perhaps you can relate. And then I also have sleep podcasts that I listen to then. And that's why I've created this podcast for you. I love the genre so much. I wanted to add another voice to the voices that are lulling people to sleep. So hopefully this will work for you. If this is your first time listening, it may take a few evenings for your consciousness to adjust. My recommendation is to turn the volume down low. This is not the kind of podcast if you're using it for sleep. I actually know some people use it during the day because it just helps you relax, which is cool. However you use it is awesome. I'm grateful you're listening. But if you are using it to try to drift off to sleep, I find it helpful to have the volume down low, almost so that my mind has to reach for the words. There's something about that for me that helps me fall asleep. So see what works best for you. Volume up, volume down. There's no right or wrong way to use this podcast. You just attune to what seems to suit your style and however you're guided to use it. Whenever you're guided to listen, whether you're using it when you commute to work in the morning because it helps calm you down, or you listen to it in the car because it brings you good vibes. It doesn't only have to be used for sleep. You can listen whenever you want. I will always endeavor to be somewhat interesting, but also kind of boring. To walk that fine line so that it won't be so compelling that you can't go to sleep. And most importantly, that this podcast is infused with love for you. Love from my heart to yours, and also from the beautiful angels who are my co-hosts. Just when I said that, I felt this wave of joy come through from the angels. They're like, yes, we are your co-hosts. We have a podcast. So we are here to delight you. One of my favorite energies is delight. You know, when something just delights you, it delights me to be here with you. It delights me to pull the blanket over my head and make a blanket fort. As some of you know, this is how I record the podcast. One thing that I didn't know before I started podcasting is you need a really good microphone, but a really good microphone picks up everything. And I've heard about how others do this. Actually, the first time I became aware of really needing to be cognizant of ambient sound was from Andrew Ackerman, who hosts the Sleep With Me podcast, which was the first sleep podcast I ever listened to. And he called it the climb-in closet. He outfitted one of the closets in his apartment with moving blankets to help dampen the sound. And he would go in there, so he would have a very quiet recording space. And another gentleman who hosts another podcast also talks about that he has outfitted one of his closets as his recording studio. And my husband and I live in a rather small house and we have no open closets. So I just thought, I'm going to pull a blanket over my head like a blanket fort. And that'll kind of create that cool ambiance. So here we are in my blanket fort, whispering to you as you get ready to drift off to sleep. How cool is that? And I don't know, perhaps you can tell I'm a little giddy and delighted today as I record this because of the book we're going to be reading. I usually don't share with you the story material in this part of the podcast, but I feel guided to do so in this episode because, my friends, we are going to be reading from Winnie the Pooh. House at the Corner, Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, Piglet, Eeyore. The original Winnie the Pooh book was published in 1926, and any material published before 26 is now in public domain. So I've been holding on to this for a special episode, and it just feels like this is the one where we're going to crack it open and perhaps revisit our childhoods. So there's just a beautiful energy of lightness of spirit and sweetness and joy present as I record this. And the thing is even if you're not feeling any of these vibrations, maybe you're having a rather challenging week, or your heart is feeling tender, these energies come in almost, if you can think of them as infusions, that you don't have to try to be happy in this moment with me. But the energies, the frequencies we are sending to you, you're almost receiving by osmosis. You're receiving these brighter energies right now. Especially if you're going to be drifting off to sleep, your greater consciousness can be present with us in this lightness of spirit, and perhaps it will bring you some relief from where you are right now. So I'm going to go ahead and invite the angels in to join us, and they are already here. So I invite you to take a deep breath in and release. Cozy on up and snuggle on in. And let your body grow heavy and deep as you just snuggle on into your bed. And beautiful, beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here. And I ask that you bring forward waves upon waves of golden light and divine love in service to all who are listening to this broadcast, sending ripples of blessings and goodness and healing to all of our beloveds who are gathered here, knowing that the love that you bring in is deep and bright and helps to activate a continuum of healing and transformation in service to each of our highest and best goods. So, dear ones, just take a nice deep breath in, allowing the love of your angels to wash over you. Imagine, if you will, that the room that you are in is being filled with a soft pink light. This light contains divine love that has been calibrated just for you, because the angels know your path. They know where you are. They know what is in your heart. And they are here to support you. So allow yourself to receive their love. And recognize that there's nothing you need to do in this moment. You get to just be, that you have done enough. And you are worthy of love. You are worthy of being cherished. You are a blessing here on earth. And I am so deeply grateful for the opportunity to shine love upon you. So take a deep breath in and just receive. That's all you have to do is receive. And the angels will do all the heavy lifting. And so, while you rest and drift off, we're going to start our story for tonight. So, as I've already shared with you, our story for tonight is Winnie the Pooh by A. Milne, written in 1926. And before I start reading from the book, I want to invite you to perhaps connect the dots with what your relationship has been with Winnie the Pooh and with some of your favorite books from childhood. I'm in the midst of facilitating a wonderful class called the Soul Stories Guild. And in class this week, the angels were leading us through a process and downloading several different prompts to help us connect with our soul stories. And one of the prompts they brought forward in a string of other prompts was, what was your favorite stuffed animal as a child? And when they brought that forward, something cracked open for me. You know, as a channel, I'm channeling this information from the angels, but I'm also experiencing it as it flows through. And I love that prompt. what was your favorite stuffed animal as a child? If you had one, not everybody had one, or your favorite doll, or your favorite toy, or your favorite game. Thought I would share with you just a short recitation of my favorite stuffed animal growing up. It was a little stuffed cocker spaniel named Peanuts. Now, I don't know if I named him Peanuts and it was a him, he was a him. I don't know if I named him Peanuts or if maybe he came already named. I don't remember. And I don't remember when I got him. My first memory of him was he was already well loved, meaning his stuffing was compacted and he was very floppy because I had squished him so much. So I think I likely slept with him every night and carried him with me during the day. And I remember comforting myself by, sucking on my finger. I sucked my finger instead of my thumb. That was unusual even back then. And I would rub his ears against my cheek. He had these soft, curly ears. And I loved him. He was my favorite. And I had other stuffed animals, but he's the one that I remember. And I was thinking about this yesterday morning that I don't remember when he went away. I don't have a memory of, I'm sure at some point he got thrown out in my life because that's what happens to well-loved stuffed animals. And I don't have any story associated with when he went away. So at some point he went to the stuffed animal Rainbow Bridge. But I have good memories of him. And I remember I was always asking my parents for a dog. And finally, when I was 13 years old, they gave in, I think probably because I wore them down. And I had hoped we were going to get a Cocker Spaniel like Peanuts, my stuffed animal come to life. But one of my siblings lobbied for a Samoyed, which if you've ever seen a Samoyed, it's no wonder. They're gorgeous dogs. They're all white sled dogs. So that was the breed of dog we would get in our family. But here's an ode to Peanuts and to all of our stuffed animals that were so well loved that they started falling apart and getting floppy and their stuffing would be compacted. But they brought us so much comfort. I thought that's a good start to Winnie the Pooh. And the other thing that comes forward for me about Winnie the Pooh is that glorious song from Kenny Loggins, House at Pooh Corner. The lyrics that start, Winnie the Pooh and I walked along in the branches lit up by the moon, posing our questions to Owl and Eeyore. Right? It's such a beautiful song, and whenever I hear it, I'm so happy. So all of these warm, sweet memories are flooding in for me as I prepare to read this to you, and perhaps you can feel this energy of light and delight and sweetness. And how sweet it would be if we could have a tea party with all of our favorite stuffed animals. Somewhere in the astral realm, you are cordially invited. Peanuts and I invite you to a tea party. You and your plus one, whether your plus one is your favorite doll or a stuffed animal or your best invisible friend, you're invited to our tea party. We'll be sending out the invitation soon. But for now, let us visit Winnie the Pooh. The book begins with a dedication. It says, to her. That's sweet. To her. Hand in hand we come, Christopher, Robin, and I, to lay this book in your lap. Say you're surprised. Say you like it. Say it's just what you wanted. Because it's yours. Because we love you. What a beautiful way to start. And then there's a little drawing with Winnie the Pooh scratching his head in front of a bath mat. It says bath mat on it. And then we start with the introduction. If you happen to have read another book about Christopher Robin, you may remember that he once had a swan, or the swan had Christopher Robin, I don't know which, and that he used to call this swan Pooh. That was a long time ago, and when we said goodbye, we took the name with us, and we didn't think the swan would want it anymore. Well, when Edward Bear said that he would like an exciting name all to himself, Christopher Robin said at once, without stopping to think, that he was Winnie the Pooh, and he was. So as I have explained the Pooh part, I will now explain the rest of it. You can't be in London for long without going to the zoo. There are some people who begin the zoo at the beginning, called Way In, and walk as quickly as they can past every cage until they get to the one called Way Out. But the nicest people go straight to the animal they love the most and stay there. So when Christopher Robin goes to the zoo, he goes to where the polar bears are, and he whispers something to the third keeper from the left, and the doors are unlocked, and we wander through dark passages and up steep stairs until, at last, we come to the special cage, and the cage is opened, and out trots something brown and furry, and with a happy cry of, "Oh, bear!" Christopher Robin rushes into its arms. Now this bear's name is Winnie, which shows what a good name for bears it is. But the funny thing is that we can't remember whether Winnie is called after Pooh or Pooh after Winnie. We did know once, but we have forgotten. I had written as far as this when Piglet looked up and said in his squeaky voice, "What about me?" "My dear Piglet," I said, "the whole book is about you." "So it is about Pooh," he squeaked. "You see what it is. He is jealous because he thinks Pooh is having a grand introduction all to himself. Pooh is the favorite, of course, there's no denying it. But Piglet comes in for a good many things which Pooh misses, because you can't take Pooh to school without everybody knowing it. But Piglet is so small that he slips into a pocket where it is very comfortable to feel him when you are not quite sure whether twice 7 is 12 or 22. Sometimes he slips out and has a good look in the ink pot, and in this way he has got more education than Pooh. But Pooh doesn't mind. Some have brains and some haven't, he says, and there it is. And now all the others are saying, well, what about us? So perhaps the best thing to do is to stop writing introductions and get on with the book. A. Milne. And then we have our contents. And now we start. And there's a picture of Christopher Robin pulling Winnie the Pooh, the stuffed animal, down the stairs head first. He's holding Pooh just by one arm. And this chapter is entitled, in which we are introduced to Winnie the Pooh and some bees, and the stories begin. Here is Edward Bear coming downstairs now, bump, 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 on the back of his head, behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs. But sometimes he feels that there really is another way, if only he could stop bumping for a moment and think of it. And then he feels that perhaps there isn't. Anyhow, here he is at the bottom, and ready to be introduced to you, Winnie the Pooh. When I first heard his name, I said, just as you are going to say, but I thought he was a boy. So did I, said Christopher Robin. Well, then you can't call him Winnie. I don't. But you said, he's Winnie the Pooh. Don't you know what "thur" means? Ah, yes, now I do, I said quickly, and I hope you do too, because it's all the explanation you are going to get. Sometimes Winnie the Pooh likes a game of some sort when he comes downstairs, and sometimes he likes to sit quietly in front of the fire and listen to a story. This evening, what about a story, said Christopher Robin. What about a story, I said. Could you very sweetly tell Winnie the Pooh one? I suppose I could, I said. What sorts of stories does he like? About himself, because he's that sort of bear. Oh, I see. So could you very sweetly? I'll try, I said. So I tried. Once upon a time, a very long time ago now, about last Friday, Winnie the Pooh lived in a forest, all by himself, under the name of Sanders. What does under the name mean? Asked Christopher Robin. It means he had the name over the door in gold letters and lived under it. One day, when he was out walking, he came to an open place in the middle of the forest, and in the middle of this place was a large oak tree. And from the top of the tree there came a loud buzzing noise. Winnie the Pooh sat down at the foot of the tree, put his head between his paws, and began to think. First of all, he said to himself, that buzzing noise means something. You don't get a buzzing noise like that, just buzzing and buzzing without it meaning something. And if there's a buzzing noise, somebody's making a buzzing noise. And the only reason for making a buzzing noise that I know of is because you are a bee. And then he thought another long time and said, and the only reason for being a bee that I know of is making honey. And then he got up and said, and the only reason for making honey is so that I can eat it. So he began to climb the tree. He climbed and he climbed and he climbed, and as he climbed he sang a little song to himself. It went like this. Isn't it funny how a bear likes honey? Buzz, buzz, buzz. I wonder why he does. Then he climbed a little further and a little further, and then just a little further. By that time he had thought of another song. It's a very funny thought that if bears were bees, they'd build their nests at the bottom of the trees. And being so, if bees were bears, we shouldn't have to climb up all these stairs. He was getting rather tired by this time, so that is why he sang a complaining song. He was nearly there now, and if he just stood on that branch, crack. Oh, help, said Pooh as he dropped 10 feet on the branch below him. If only I hadn't, he said as he bounced 20 feet onto the next branch. You see what I meant to do, he explained as he turned head over heels and crashed onto another branch 30 feet below. What I meant to do, of course, it was rather, he admitted, as he slithered very quickly through the next 6 branches. It all comes, I suppose, he decided as he said goodbye to the last branch, spun round 3 times, and flew gracefully into a gorse bush. It all comes of liking honey so much. Oh, help. He crawled out of the gorse bush, brushed the prickles from his nose, and began to think again. And the first person he thought of was Christopher Robin. Was that me? Said Christopher Robin in an odd voice, hardly daring to believe it. That was you. Christopher Robin said nothing, but his eyes got larger and larger and his face got pinker and pinker. So Winnie the Pooh went round to his friend Christopher Robin, who lived behind a green door in another part of the forest. Good morning, Christopher Robin, he said. Good morning, Winnie the Pooh, he said to you. I wonder if you got such a thing as a balloon about you. A balloon? Yes, I just said to myself coming along, I wonder if Christopher Robin has such a thing as a balloon about him. I just said it to myself, thinking of balloons and wondering. What do you want a balloon for, you said? Winnie the Pooh looked around to see that nobody was listening, put his paw to his mouth, and said in a deep whisper, Honey. But you don't get honey with balloons. I do. Well, it just happened that you had been to a party the day before at the house of your friend Piglet, and you had balloons at the party. You had a big green balloon, and one of Rabbit's relations had another big blue one and had left it behind, being really too young to go to a party after all. And so you had brought the green one and the blue one home with you. Which one would you like, you asked Pooh. He put his head between his paws and thought very carefully. It's like this, he said. When you go after honey with a balloon, the great thing is not to let the bees know you're coming. Now, if you have a green balloon, they might think you are only part of that tree and not notice you. And if you have a blue balloon, they might think you are only part of the sky and not notice you. And the question is, which is most likely? Wouldn't they notice you underneath the balloon? You asked. Well, they might or they might not, said Winnie the Pooh. You never can tell with bees. He thought for a moment and said, I shall try to look like a small black cloud. That will deceive them. Then you had better have the blue balloon, you said, and so it was decided. Well, you both went out with the blue balloon, and you took your gun with you just in case, as you always did, and Winnie the Pooh went to a very muddy place that he knew of, and rolled until he was black all over, and then, when the balloon was blown up as big, and you and Pooh were both holding on to the string, you let it go suddenly. And Pooh Bear floated gracefully up into the sky and stayed there, level with the top of the tree and about 20 feet away from it. Hooray, you shouted. Isn't that fine? Shouted Winnie the Pooh down to you. What do I look like? You look like a bear holding on to a balloon, you said. Not, said Pooh anxiously, not like a small black cloud in a blue sky? Not very much. Ah, well, perhaps from up here it looks different. And as I say, you never can tell with bees. There was no wind to blow him nearer to the tree, so there he stayed. He could see the honey, could smell the honey, but he couldn't quite reach the honey. After a little while, he called down to you. "Christopher Robin," he said in a loud whisper. "Hello. I think the bees suspect something." "What sort of thing?" "I don't know, but something tells me they're suspicious. Perhaps they think that you're after their honey. It may be that, you never can tell with bees." There was another little silence, and then he called down to you again. "Christopher Robin." "Yes?" "Have you an umbrella in your house?" "I think so." "I wish you'd bring it out here and walk up and down with it and look up at me every now and then and say, 'Tut, tut, it certainly looks like rain.' I think if you did that, it would help the deception which we are practicing on these bees." Well, you laughed to yourself, "Silly old bear," but you didn't say it out loud because you were so fond of him. And you went home for your umbrella. "Oh, there you are," called down Winnie the Pooh, as soon as you got back to the tree. I was beginning to get anxious. I have discovered that the bees are now definitely suspicious. "Shall I put up my umbrella?" you said. "Yes, but wait a moment. We must be practical. The important bee to deceive is the queen bee. Can you see which is the queen bee from down there?" "No." "A pity. Well, now if you walk up and down with your umbrella saying, 'Tut, tut, it looks like rain,' I shall do what I can by singing a little cloud song, such as a cloud might sing. Go." So while you walked up and down and wondered if it would rain, Winnie the Pooh sang this song. "How sweet to be a cloud floating in the blue. Every little cloud always sings aloud. How sweet to be a cloud floating in the blue. It makes him very proud to be a little cloud." The bees were still buzzing as suspiciously as ever. Some of them, indeed, left their nest and flew all around the cloud as it began the second verse of the song, and one bee sat down on the nose of the cloud for a moment and then got up again. "Christopher, ow, Robin," called out the cloud. "Yes?" "I have been thinking, and I have come to a very important decision. These are the wrong sort of bees." "Are they?" "Quite the wrong sort. So I should think they would make the wrong sort of honey, shouldn't you?" "Would they?" "Yes. So I think I shall come down." "How?" you asked. Winnie the Pooh hadn't thought about this. If he let go of the string, he would fall bump, and he didn't like the idea of that. So he thought for a long time, and then he said, "Christopher Robin, you must shoot the balloon with your gun. Have you got your gun?" "Of course I have," you said, "but if I do that, it will spoil the balloon," you said. "But if you don't," said Pooh, "I shall have to let go, and that would spoil me." When he put it like this, you saw how it was, and you aimed very carefully at the balloon and fired. "Ow," said Pooh. "Did I miss?" you asked. "You didn't exactly miss," said Pooh, "but you missed the balloon." "I'm so sorry," you said, and you fired again. And this time you hit the balloon, and the air came slowly out, and Winnie the Pooh floated down to the ground. But his arms were so stiff from holding on to the string of the balloon all that time that they stayed up straight in the air for more than a week. And whenever a fly came and settled on his nose, he had to blow it off. And I think, but I am not sure, that that is why he was always called Pooh. "Is that the end of the story?" asked Christopher Robin. "Well, that's the end of that one. There are others. About Pooh and me, and Piglet and Rabbit and all of you, don't you remember?" Well, I do remember, and then when I try to remember, I forget. That day when Pooh and Piglet tried to catch the heffalump, they didn't catch it, did they? No. Pooh couldn't because he hasn't any brain. Did I catch it? Well, that comes into the story. Christopher Robin nodded. I do remember, he said, only Pooh doesn't very well. So that's why he likes having it told to him again, because then it's a real story and not just remembering. That's just how I feel, I said. Christopher Robin gave a deep sigh, picked his bear up by the leg and walked off to the door, trailing Pooh behind him. At the door he turned and said, "Coming to see me have my bath?" "I might," I said. "I didn't hurt him when I shot him, did I?" "Not a bit." He nodded and went out, and in a moment I heard Winnie the Pooh bump, 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 going up the stairs behind him. And now we go to chapter 2, in which Pooh goes visiting and gets into a tight place. Edward Bear, known to his friends as Winnie the Pooh, or Pooh for short, was walking through the forest one day, humming proudly to himself. He had made up a little hum that very morning as he was doing his stoutness exercises in front of the glass. Tra-la-la, tra-la-la, as he stretched up as high as he could go, and then tra-la-la, tra-la, oh, help, la, as he tried to reach his toes. After breakfast, he had said it over and over to himself until he had learned it off by heart. And now he was humming it right through properly. It went like this. Tra-la-la, tra-la-la, rum-tum tiddly-um-tum. Tiddle-iddle, tiddle-iddle, rum-tum tiddle-um. Well, he was humming this hum to himself and walking along gaily, wondering what everybody else was doing and what it felt like being somebody else, when suddenly he came to a sandy bank, and in the bank was a large hole. "Ah," said Pooh, "if I know anything about anything, that hole means rabbit," he said, "and rabbit means company," he said, "and company means food, and listening to me humming, and such like rum-tum-tiddle-um." So he bent down, put his head into the hole, and called out, "Is anybody at home?" There was a sudden scuffling noise from inside the hole, and then silence. "What I said was, 'Is anybody home?'" called out Pooh very loudly. "No," said a voice, and then added, "You needn't shout so loud. I heard you quite well the first time." "Bother," said Pooh. "Isn't there anybody here at all?" "Nobody." Winnie the Pooh took his head out of the hole and thought for a little. He thought to himself, well, there must be somebody there because somebody must have said nobody. So he put his head back in the hole and said, "Hello, Rabbit. Isn't that you?" "No," said Rabbit in a different sort of voice this time. "But isn't that Rabbit's voice?" "I don't think so," said Rabbit. "It isn't meant to be." "Oh," said Pooh. He took his head out of the hole and had another think, and then he put it back and said, "Well, could you very kindly tell me where Rabbit is?" "He has gone to see his friend Pooh Bear, who is a great friend of his." "But this is me," said Bear, very much surprised. "What sort of me?" "Pooh Bear." "Are you quite sure?" said Rabbit, still more surprised. "Quite sure," said Pooh. "Oh, well then, come in." So Pooh pushed and pushed and pushed his way through the hole, and at last he got in. You were quite right, said Rabbit, looking at him all over. It is you. Glad to see you. Who did you think I was? Well, I wasn't sure. You know how it is in the forest. One can't have anybody coming into one's house. One has to be careful. What about a mouthful of something? Pooh always liked a little something at 11 o'clock in the morning, and he was very glad to see Rabbit getting out the plates and mugs. And when Rabbit said, honey or condensed milk with your bread, he was so excited that he said both. And then, so as not to seem greedy, he added, but don't bother about the bread, please. And for a long time after that, he said nothing, until at last, humming to himself in a rather sticky voice, he got up, shook Rabbit lovingly by the paw, and said that he must be going on. Must you? Said Rabbit politely. Well, said Pooh, I could stay a little longer if you, and he tried very hard to look in the direction of the larder. As a matter of fact, said Rabbit, I was going out myself directly. Oh, well, then I'll be going. Goodbye. Well, goodbye if you're sure you won't have any more. Is there any more? Said Pooh quickly. Rabbit took the covers off the dishes and said no, there wasn't. I thought not, said Pooh, nodding to himself. Well, goodbye. I must be going on. So he started to climb out of the hole. He pulled with his front paws and pushed with his back paws, and in a little while his nose was out in the open again, and then his ears, and then his front paws, and then his shoulders. And then, oh, help, said Pooh, I'd better go back. Oh, bother, said Pooh, I shall have to go on. I can't do either, said Pooh. Oh, help and bother. Now by this time Rabbit wanted to go for a walk too, and finding the front door full, he went out by the back door and came around to Pooh and looked at him. Hello, are you stuck? He asked. No, said Pooh carelessly, just resting and thinking and humming to myself. Here, give us a paw. Pooh Bear stretched out a paw, and Rabbit pulled and pulled and pulled. Ow, cried Pooh, you're hurting. The fact is, said Rabbit, you're stuck. It all comes, said Pooh crossly, of not having front doors big enough. It all comes, said Rabbit sternly, of eating too much. I thought at the time, said Rabbit. Only I didn't like to say anything, said Rabbit. That one of us was eating too much, said Rabbit, and I knew it wasn't me, he said. Well, well, I shall go and fetch Christopher Robin. Christopher Robin lived at the other end of the forest, and when he came back with Rabbit and saw the front half of Pooh, he said, silly old bear, in such a loving voice that everyone felt quite hopeful again. I was just beginning to think, said Bear, sniffing slightly, that Rabbit might never be able to use his front door again, and I should hate that, he said. So should I, said Rabbit. Use his front door again, said Christopher Robin. Of course he'll use his front door again. Good, said Rabbit. If we can't pull you out, Pooh, we might just push you back. Rabbit scratched his whiskers thoughtfully and pointed out that when once Pooh was pushed back, he was back, and of course nobody was more glad to see Pooh than he was. Still there was some lived in trees and some lived underground. And you mean I'd never get out, said Pooh. I mean, said Rabbit, that having got so far it seems a pity to waste it. Christopher Robin nodded. Then there's only one thing to be done, he said. We shall have to wait for you to get thin again. How long does getting thin take? Asked Pooh anxiously. About a week, I should think. But I can't stay here for a week. You can stay here all right, silly old bear. It's getting you out which is so difficult. We'll read to you, said Rabbit cheerfully. And I hope it won't snow, he added. And I say, old fellow, you are taking up a good deal of room in my house. Do you mind if I use your back legs as a towel horse? Because I mean, there they are doing nothing, and it would be very convenient just to hang the towels on them. A week, said Pooh gloomily. What about meals? I'm afraid no meals, said Christopher Robin, because of getting thin quicker. But we will read to you. Bear began to sigh, and then found he couldn't because he was so tightly stuck, and a tear rolled down his eye as he said, Then would you read a sustaining book such as would help and comfort a wedged bear in great tightness? So for a week, Christopher Robin read that sort of book at the north end of Pooh. And Rabbit hung his washing on the south end, and in between Bear felt himself getting slenderer and slenderer, and at the end of the week Christopher Robin said, Now. So he took hold of Pooh's front paws, and Rabbit took hold of Christopher Robin, and all Rabbit's friends and relations took hold of Rabbit, and they pulled together. And for a long time, Pooh only said, ow, and oh. And then all of a sudden he just said, pop, just as if the cork were coming out of a bottle. And Christopher Robin and Rabbit and all Rabbit's friends and relations went head over heels backwards. And on the top of them came Winnie the Pooh, free. So with a nod of thanks to his friends, he went on with his walk through the forest, humming proudly to himself. But Christopher Robin looked after him lovingly and said to himself, Silly old bear. So there we go. We have our first 2 Winnie the Pooh stories, and there are more to come. What a sweet, sweet story, and I'm hoping it is bringing you warm, fuzzy memories of childhood and imagination and the wonders of a good bedtime story. So, the angels and I are wishing you a good rest. You are loved and you are precious, and I look forward to connecting again soon. Be well. Thank you.